I'm Ray Betcher, and I was drafted in January of 1943, and I was just 20 years old at the time, and my 21 couple months later, and
Tell me where you were from.
oh, I was at the time I was from Roseville, Michigan, which is one of the suburbs of Detroit.
And what were you doing at the time?
Well, during during high school, I had worked for about 2 years, and then 2 years afterwards in a department store. But then a few months before I was drafted, of course, we knew it was coming, so I had gotten a job in a machine shop, and kind of as an apprentice, and working on a night shift, and it worked out fine. And I think that little bit of help, or that little bit of experience in a machine shop, also helped me out with my mechanical work.
Tell me what your position was and which bomb group or groups you were affiliated with during your service period.
The only group I was ever affiliated with was the 467th, and of course I was assigned to it in Salt Lake City, and then of course we trained at Wendover, Utah, and went overseas with them, and I was with the same crew, and the same airplane, all of my service time, and of course came back in the Queen Mary, and shortly afterwards was discharged. So.
What was your work like? What was involved in being a mechanic on an airplane?
Well, actually, as far as the mechanics go, we did mostly it involved mostly the service work on the engines. And, well, I say service work. A good share of it was after every mission was refueling and refilling the fuel tanks. And then there was always a few inspections. We'd inspect for holes. Of course, Joe did most of these things, and then he assigned some jobs too. But then there are times when, always times when engine changes roll around. And by the way, Witchcraft, by the time it had gone 100 missions, we had gone through 12 engine changes. And in the earlier part of the war, we got new engines, so they lasted probably up to 300 hours. But then we started getting rebuilt engines, and most of them didn't last much more than 100, 150 hours. So I know that by the time it left England, we had changed about 25 engines on it.
How did Witchcraft get its name?
It was given, we were talking about that to a couple of the flight crew today, and they think that the flight engineer was one of the ones that may have given it the name, and they think he did the painting on this, the original painting on the side of it. Now, in the original painting, it was, the lettering on Witchcraft was very small and not very legible. And once over in England, why, one of the fellows in our squadron was, I think he was an inspector, Gill, by the way. And he was pretty handy with the brush, and he did the large painting of Witchcraft on each side. And it was a bright orange in color. Yeah.
Were you in England when Witchcraft came over with the original crew, or how did you first meet Witchcraft?
Well, of course, we had worked on it in Wendover, Utah, and then the flight crew took it to Wichita, Kansas for some modifications and flew it overseas. And they had some problems on the way over. The pilot had a few medical problems, and then I think it was Dakar or somewhere in Africa, they blew a cylinder head. And of course, we had gone over on the Liberty ship, and we got over there on the base about the 10th of March. So we actually were there a few days before the flight crew brought the plane in. Oh, this is a picture of Colonel Shower, and I copied this from a group of from a picture of all of the group officers, and of course Colonel Shower was a very, very strict, I think, commanding officer. But you know, after all said and done, I think his strictness helped out in fewer casualties, better bombing results, and I really admire the man for what he did. Well, this is a picture of Witchcraft And whether George Dong and I were talking about this particular photo just the other day, and the plane was taken up just strictly for pictures. And as a matter of fact, several of us went along for the ride. Joe was along, and George and myself. And it's pretty hard to see, but there are some of us. We were very aware that another plane was flying by us, and they were taking pictures. So we're in the windows there. If you, yeah, pretty hard to tell though. This picture of Witchcraft actually during a bomb run, and I don't have any information on what raid it might have been on, and being a mechanic, I don't really recognize the what size bombs, or whether they were general purpose or what they were. They looked like, I would think, GPs, but on pictures like this, Joe Ramirez enjoyed, I think, a little bit of being kind of a celebrity because of the number of missions it had, and he was able to get photographs, and he was pretty generous in giving us ground crew the extra photos, and so all of us did have quite a number of photos. In this photo is Joe Ramirez, George Dong, Walter Elliott, and myself, and we were standing on the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. We had gone down there for I think it was it SHAFE? What was called SHAFE headquarters, and it was sometime after the 100th mission, and they interviewed George Dong, and he made a tape in Chinese for propaganda purposes during the war. Oh, I just happened to be just sitting on a 2,000-pound bomb. Is probably either sometime before a mission, or else when they came back, occasionally they would bring the bombs back, and they would take them back to storage. Something about this 2,000-pound bomb. On one occasion there at the base, on returning from a mission, one of these 2,000-pounders got hung up in the bomb bay of one of the planes, and when it landed on the runway, this bomb dropped out onto the runway, skidded down the runway to a halt. You know, nothing happened. Of course, it was the arming device had already had been disarmed. And that's a picture of Witchcraft, and it was taken on the 8th of August in 1944 by one of the base photographers, and it apparently didn't have, perhaps it had 40 or 50 missions on it by that time. On its return from its 120th mission, one of the base photographers came out and had the 9 crew members and 3 of us ground crew members hold up our 10 fingers for signifying the 120 missions. There is just doing a little bit of maintenance work. We had the cowling removed, and or it might have possibly even have been after an engine change, because the other fellow in the picture was a prop specialist. This is a small shack that we built out there at the flight line, and it was built out of any materials that we could scrounge, like bomb crates, and as a matter of fact, Joe Ramirez borrowed a weapons carrier and went over to the base maintenance and did a little bit of early dawn requisitioning, and came back with a load of corrugated sheet metal, which made a real nice roof. And we kept our tools out there, and then in the mornings when the flight crews would come out there, sometimes they'd come out and spend a few minutes in it before a mission. It's just a picture that I think I probably took this picture, and it's of the Witchcraft sometime after its 100th mission. Again, this is just another little snapshot. And I'm standing on the horizontal stabilizer, and I'm a 6-footer, so that gives an idea of the size of the upper portion of the vertical stabilizer. This is George Dong, and he's sitting on the entrance to one of the bomb shelters. In our hut area, there were several of these bomb shelters, and when we first got there, the first couple of weeks, why, we were very conscientious, and whenever the loudspeaker system said there was a raid on, why everybody got out of bed and went out into these bomb shelters. But after that, we got to the point where we didn't use these things anymore. We didn't. I don't recall anyone getting up and going to the bomb shelters. This is George Dong sitting on a 2,000-pound bomb. It's probably the same one that I sat on in another picture that we have here in the book. Joe Ramirez is up there doing some maintenance work, and then again, I'm pretty sure on this that it was after an engine change, because Matt Batone was a prop specialist, and you can see him there looking at Joe. This is George Dong working on an engine change, and so the other person in the picture was a prop specialist who they always helped us out on engine changes. This is George Dong working on an engine change. I don't happen to recognize the other fellow in the picture right now, but it shows you some of the stands that we had to use, and then also the A-frame, which they used to bring out. It had a chain fall on it, and we would lift the engine, remove the 4 mounting bolts, and then the engine could be lowered to the ground. Later on, they had a truck with a boom on the front, and which was a little faster and probably safer than these stands. This is a shot of the Maid's Head Inn, and it was right in town in Norwich. And matter of fact, about a block or so away was where the Liberty Run trucks dropped us off and picked us up to take us back to the base. This is a place in Norwich. Well, it was almost across the street from the Maid's Head Inn, and it was known as Samson and Hercules, and it was a very popular dance hall for most of the GIs. I can't say that I was ever in there. I guess I spent most of my time sitting in the barracks, or sitting in our hut, I should say, writing to my wife, who I pretty faithfully wrote to every day while I was over there. That's Walter Elliott, and in the background is Westminster Abbey. And this was taken when the 4 of us went to London for, we were sent down there to, sent to the BBC, where George Dong did an interview. This is Joe Ramirez, and in the background is Westminster Abbey. And it was taken when the 4 of us ground crew members were sent down to London on orders, and at the BBC, while George Dong did an interview for some propaganda broadcasts. Up near our squadron area, where all the ground crews and others were housed, I think someone in our squadron had some of the maintenance crews paint this sign and plant it up near our area, and I don't remember how long it stayed there, but I don't think it was a very popular sign. It's something you probably don't normally do on an RBB. That's the entrance to the 790th Squadron area, and of course all of the ground crews and all the service people were up in this area. The combat crews were in a separate area on the base. When the plane returned from its 100th mission, they had a little celebration there on the base, and it wasn't very long. But General Kepner and General, who was commanded the 2nd Air Division, and General Peck, who was the wing commander, both came over, and they presented we on the ground crew with the certificates of merit, and then Joe got a Legion of Merit, I believe it was, for it. Left to right is Jack Kramer, bombardier, Charlie Minsloff, navigator, John Oder, co-pilot, George Reed, pilot, Bob McEwen, tail gunner, Alex McLean, ball turret gunner, Hank Kubasek, a gunner. That is Vern Bundrock, was also a gunner. Mel Bland, the radio operator, and Bob DeKerf, the flight engineer. These are my identification plates, and they're commonly known as dog tags, and they're still on the original chain that I had when I, of course, when I was over there. Well, I wore the. You have to wear these things all the time. I mean, fellas even wore these in the shower.
Do you remember your number?
It's something you never forget. It's 365-59571, and that sticks with you forever. This is a pair of diagonal cutting pliers, and it's a tool that, well, I brought it home from my tool chest. Probably shouldn't have done it, but use these in cutting wire primarily. And as you know, almost every nut and bolt on an aircraft has some method of safety on it, and you do an awful lot of safety wiring. And that's what these were used for, and this is the actual pair that I used. I've used them over the past 40 years since I've been home, and I'll have to admit that I polished them up a little bit for this for this interview. This piece of metal is a piece of flak, which is probably a 90 millimeter anti-aircraft shell fired by the Germans, and in all the movies you see of combat, those little black puffs of smoke are the shells exploding, and it breaks the shell casing into pieces like this, which are very jagged. And it was just such a piece like this that went through the catwalk on one of our planes, Perils of Pauline, during a bomb run, and one of the crew members was standing there looking out the bomb bay at the time, and the piece of flak hit him in the face, and unfortunately the rest of the crew just wasn't able to save him. And his name was Joseph Peralt, and this happened on the 25th of June in 1944 on his birthday. These are some fragments from bomb casings, and when the 467th hauled gasoline over to a base in France, they had previously bombed this base probably a couple of weeks before they started hauling gasoline in there. And I happened to go over on just for a ride to deliver a load of gasoline and pick these fragments up on the runway of this German, which had been a German base. This was at, Clastres, France. This is just a belt buckle which is probably commonly available at some of the museums and so forth, but this particular one was given to me by Andy Cappy, who was in our squadron, and he had it gold-plated, so I feel rather fortunate in having a gold-plated B-24.
What were your first impressions of your ground crew members that you worked with?
Well, of course, I was assigned to the crew out of Wendover, Utah, and you know, after you're in service for a short while, you get very used to accepting new members to a crew or exchanges of members and so forth. But our crew is a little bit unusual in that our crew chief, Joe Ramirez, was Mexican-American. The assistant crew chief, George Dong, was of Chinese descent. I was of probably German and English descent. And Joe Vetter had told someone that he was Pennsylvania Dutch, and then Walter Elliott came along and said he was an All-American. So, but you'd accept your assigned crew quite readily, no problems.
What happened to your ground crew as the record of Witchcraft started to develop?
Well, I think that it kind of changes your outlook a little bit on what you do, perhaps, but we just did the best job we could, and tried to keep the Witchcraft going.
What kind of pressure were the air crews under when they flew Witchcraft? Were you aware of any pressure on them?
I think with it, we were aware of a little extra pressure on them, and I'm sure that they were. And I'm probably came from, you can say, almost right down from shower on. Everybody being aware, nobody ever wanted to turn back. And on one occasion that I know of, they lost an engine before they left England. And under normal circumstances, they would have turned back to the base. But they knew they had a record going, and they fell in with another group, went over, dropped their bombs in France, and returned on the 3 engines without any further problems.
What do you think the attitude was of the higher-ups, such as the squadron commander, Major Holdridge, and bomb group commander Colonel Schauer, and others that may have had some responsibility for the planes?
Well, I'm sure that they liked to see a good record made, not only by Witchcraft, but everybody else on the any other plane on the base. And Major Holdridge was just one of the finest people, and we were a little closer to him because of being just our squadron commander, but we knew that Colonel Schauer did everything he could. I'm sure that he pushed a little bit of a few buttons, in order to keep things rolling in the direction he wanted to go.
What role did the squadron inspector play in this overall effort?
Well, of course, after each engine change and after some of the major inspections, like your 100-hour inspection, why, we had, I've forgotten now whether it was 2 or 3 squadron inspectors who always come in and looked over our work. But we had very little criticism from them. I think we were very thorough, tried to be very thorough in what we did. But yet, occasionally, we slipped a little.
How did your crew get along with other crews?
It didn't really seem to, I think we got along fine. I don't think there was too much resentment or anything like that from other crews. Or at least we didn't really notice it.
Do you think the air crews were glad to fly Witchcraft, or do you think they would rather avoid flying Witchcraft if it were possible?
Well, I'm sure that a lot of them probably would have liked to have gotten in at least a couple missions in the plane, but I think that probably knowing that there was a little bit more pressure on them, some of them may have been a little reluctant, to fly missions on it. That's just my thought, and I'm not certain of that at all.
What does it feel like to be involved with the so-called champion bomber of the 8th Air Force?
I don't know that it, well, it's been sort of a pleasure to me. It has affected my life some, and but yet I don't like to feel that too much publicity bothers me a little bit. And it also bothered me a little bit when I was in service.
Did you feel, or did you think at the time that the Germans knew that Witchcraft had this reputation and that it might have been a target specifically?
I would rather doubt that they knew about it, although they had an awful lot of information, and there were times when the Germans picked on particular groups of planes, but I don't think they really picked on Witchcraft at any particular time.
No, go ahead.
I don't know not much else to add to that.
Tell me what you've been doing since the war.
After the war, I got my A&E license, and I worked for 8 years at Wayne University in Detroit in aeronautical engineering. And then from there on, I wandered off into the automotive field and did automotive testing for, well, approximately about 21 years, I believe it was, at the Dana Corporation in Toledo, Ohio, and the Borg Warner Corporation in Pontiac, Michigan. I retired early at 59 and moved to northern Michigan.
What did you learn about yourself during the war?
Oh boy, you better cut this one out. I don't know what to say. I think that if anything at all, I probably surprised myself a little bit maybe in what I was capable of doing. You take somebody out of civilian life, you give them a few months of aircraft training, and they're expected to do all this type of work, and you do the best you can. You do make little mistakes once in a while, and it wasn't real easy.
Tell me what you want history to remember about your contribution to the war effort.
Well, the old witchcraft seems to be getting a lot of attention, and as time goes on, it seems like it's more and more, but we hope that records like that won't have to be set again.